My dad stood up at the family dinner table, grabbed my medical walker, and hurled it violently across the hardwood floor, shouting for the room to see how disabled I really was, while my relatives erupted into mocking laughter. I was still trapped on the floor, helpless and bruised, when the heavy front door swung open and my husband walked into the chaotic scene. He took one icy look at my tears, calmly pulled out his smartphone, and uttered exactly 5 words that permanently dismantled my father's entire financial empire in less than 60 seconds. My name is Alana, and I was the daughter who had to learn through blood and tears that a shared last name does not guarantee basic human decency. It was a humid Sunday evening in early July 2026, and I was sitting on the floor of the grand, formal dining room inside my father's sprawling estate in Savannah, Georgia. The air in the room was heavy with the rich scent of an expensive prime rib dinner, rosemary, and high-end red wine, but my chest was completely tight with an overwhelming panic. 2 years prior, a severe spinal injury from a highway car accident had left me with partial mobility loss, requiring me to use a specialized medical walker with wheels and a built-in seat to navigate my daily life. The accident had shattered my L4 and L5 vertebrae, demanding 2 intense surgeries and months of agonizing physical therapy just to regain the ability to take a few shaky steps on my own. While my recovery was a slow, painful journey, requiring daily nerve medication and immense mental fortitude, my father, Marcus Vance, viewed my physical limitations as a massive, embarrassing stain on his carefully curated public image. Marcus was a prominent, high-society commercial real estate developer in the South, a man who demanded absolute aesthetic perfection from everyone around him, and treated human beings like simple assets on a corporate balance sheet. To Marcus and my entitled step-siblings, Julian and Clara, my disability wasn't a medical reality. It was an annoying inconvenience. They constantly dropped subtle, passive-aggressive remarks at every single family gathering, shifting their eyes and sighing loudly whenever the restaurant staff had to clear a space at the table for my mobility device. They dropped cruel hints that I was simply exaggerating my injury, playing the victim to avoid working 40-hour weeks or trying to fish for a larger slice of the family trust funds. My stepmother, pulling at her diamond necklace, would constantly talk about her yoga classes, loudly wondering why some people just lacked the willpower to heal their own bodies. But what Marcus entirely failed to realize was that while I was physically recovering in my quiet apartment, my brilliant husband, David, was working tirelessly behind the scenes. David wasn't just a supportive partner who helped me stretch my legs every morning. He was the chief financial auditor for Marcus's own real estate conglomerate. David loved me fiercely, and he had spent the last 6 months quietly uncovering a massive, terrifying web of corporate corruption and tax fraud deep within my father's private business ledgers, waiting for the perfect moment to protect our future. The ultimate breaking point happened during that specific Sunday family dinner, a mandatory event Marcus insisted on to show off his newly renovated historic mansion. The dinner had been a nightmare from the moment we served the appetizers. Julian had made a joke about how my walker looked like a shopping cart, and Clara had laughed into her linen napkin, complaining that the rubber wheels were leaving faint scuff marks on the pristine chevron-patterned oak floors. I tried my best to ignore the burning humiliation, keeping my head down and focusing on my plate, but the remarks only grew bolder as the wine kept flowing. Marcus sat at the head of the table like a king, openly discussing a new multi-million-dollar riverfront development project, completely ignoring me until I accidentally bumped the edge of the mahogany table while trying to adjust my sitting posture. A small amount of water spilled from my crystal glass onto the polished wood. Marcus's face instantly darkened. He set his fork down with a heavy, deliberate thud that made the entire table go dead silent. I immediately reached for my walker, my hands trembling as the familiar burning nerve pain flared up in my lower back. I unlocked the brakes of the device, intending to stand up, cut my evening short, and excuse myself from the table before the tears blurring my vision could fall. But as I leaned my weight onto the handles to push myself upward, Marcus suddenly stood up from his leather chair. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, arrogant rage. Before I could realize what he was doing, his large hands gripped the metal frame of my walker and violently ripped it completely out of my hands. With a savage twist of his torso, he hurled the heavy medical device across the long dining room. It flew through the air, smashing loudly against the far plaster wall, shattering the plastic basket attached to the front, and denting the aluminum frame. "Let's see how disabled you really are when you don't have a pathetic prop to lean on," Marcus bellowed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You've been riding this pity train for 2 years, Alana, making this family look weak just so you can avoid standing on your own 2 feet. Because my weight had been fully committed to the handles when he ripped the walker away, I instantly lost my balance. My weak legs collapsed beneath me, and I fell hard onto the polished hardwood floor, my hip taking the brunt of the impact. A sharp, blinding shockwave of pain shot straight up my spine. I let out a gasping cry, clutching my side as I lay there, completely exposed and helpless on the floor. Instead of rushing to help me, Julian and Clara erupted into loud mocking laughter, clapping their hands as if they had just watched a comedic performance. My stepmother just took another slow sip of her Cabernet, looking away with an expression of total disgust. I was still trapped on the floor, the cold wood pressing against my cheek, my hands trembling violently as I tried to find a grip on the table leg to pull myself up when the heavy oak front doors clicked open from the grand foyer. David walked into the dining room, still holding his briefcase, having driven straight from a late-night financial closing at the corporate office. The mocking laughter in the room died down slightly as his boots stepped onto the rug, but Marcus kept a smug, arrogant smile plastered on his face. My father genuinely assumed David would just laugh along or smooth things over to keep his high-paying position at the firm. David didn't yell. He didn't rush forward with clenched fists to start a physical brawl with a man twice his size. He stopped dead in his tracks, taking one long, agonizing look at me, trapped on the floor, and I watched his jaw tighten into solid iron. His eyes went completely dead and cold. He slowly pulled his smartphone out of his tailored suit pocket, swiped the screen to dial a pre-saved private number, held the phone to his ear, and uttered exactly 5 words into the receiver with a chilling, deadpan authority. "Initiate the corporate asset seizure." Marcus's smug smile vanished entirely from his face, replaced by a deep frown. He stepped out from the head of the table, adjusting his gold watch, trying to maintain his dominant, intimidating posture in his own home. "David, what on earth are you talking about? Stop playing childish games at my dinner table, stop acting dramatic, and pick your wife up off the floor so we can finish our dessert. The only entity getting picked up today is your entire company by the federal government, Marcus," David said, his voice dripping with a quiet, calculated calm that was far more terrifying than any loud shout. He walked past my father as if Marcus were completely invisible, dropped to one knee beside me on the floor, and gently slipped his strong arms under my knees and back. He lifted me with absolute care, ensuring my spine remained straight, and placed me safely into a nearby cushioned armchair. He knelt down, kissing my forehead, whispering, "I've got you, Alana. It's completely over now. You never have to step foot in this house again." Before Marcus could even utter a confused response or demand an explanation, his personal smartphone, along with the phones of Julian and Clara, began vibrating incessantly on the table. High-priority email alerts, text messages, and secure banking notifications were lighting up their screens like fireworks. David didn't say another word to them. He simply reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick 300-page certified legal document bound in a heavy blue cover, and tossed it right onto the center of the dinner table, directly into Marcus's plate, splashing the remaining gravy over the pristine white linen. For the past 6 months, Marcus, you and your children assumed I was just a quiet, compliant accountant managing your tax loops and signing off on your offshore development permits, David stated, standing tall with his hands resting calmly in his pockets, looking directly into my father's rapidly paling face. You thought, because you threw a high salary my way, I would turn a blind eye to the rot inside your ledger. What you entirely forgot is that I am a certified forensic auditor with a legal obligation to the state. I have spent every single weekend running a comprehensive, independent audit on your riverfront construction accounts and your offshore holding firms in the Cayman Islands. You have been systematically inflating your property valuations across the state of Georgia by over 300% to secure massive bank loans, and then routing the excess capital through a shell logistics company to avoid millions in federal corporate taxes. I handed the complete, unencrypted digital data package, along with the bank routing numbers and internal emails, over to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division at exactly 5 p.m. this past Friday. Marcus stumbled backward, his leg catching the edge of his heavy dining chair as he frantically opened the binder. His hands were visibly shaking as he flipped through the audited pages, his eyes widening in pure terror as he recognized his own hidden digital signatures, private bank routing codes, and the flagged invoices for materials that were never actually purchased. This is proprietary company information. You signed an ironclad corporate non-disclosure agreement when you took the chief auditor position, David. You'll go to federal prison for breaching this contract. I will sue you for every single dime you have, Marcus stammered, his voice rising an octave into pure, unadulterated panic as he looked around at his silent, terrified children. An NDA is legally null and void under federal whistleblower protection laws when it is used to conceal ongoing felony wire fraud, bank deception, and grand larceny, I spoke up, leaning back against the cushions of the armchair, wiping the remaining tears from my face as a profound, cold feeling of absolute triumph washed over my entire body. I looked across the room at my walker, lying broken against the wall, and then back at the man who had spent my whole life making me feel worthless. You wanted to see how strong I am without my walker, Dad? Look at me. I am strong enough to sit here and watch your entire corporate empire collapse into absolute dust without blinking an eye. David's phone buzzed with a sharp confirmation text from the Federal Compliance Office. He looked down at the screen and then back up at the room. As of exactly 30 seconds ago, the United States District Court has issued an emergency asset freeze on every single commercial and personal bank accounts associated with the Vance corporate name and your private Social Security numbers, David revealed, pointing a finger at Julian and Clara, who were now staring at their smartphones in absolute horror, watching their luxury black credit cards get declined live on their banking apps. Every line of credit has been halted. Furthermore, the State Licensing Board has suspended your real estate development credentials effective immediately, pending a formal criminal indictment that will be unsealed at the federal courthouse tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Marcus collapsed heavily into his dining chair, his face entirely white, his breathing shallow as the absolute crushing realization of his total ruin finally set in. He had spent 40 years building a reputation based on wealth, dominance, and perfection, and it had all been dismantled because he couldn't control his cruelty toward his own daughter. The legal revenge over the next 3 months was absolute, public, and devastatingly thorough. Marcus was formally indicted on 12 counts of federal tax evasion, bank fraud, and corporate misrepresentation. Because the forensic data David provided was completely flawless, leaving absolutely no room for a legal defense, Marcus was forced to sign a guilty plea. resulting in a mandatory 5-year prison sentence in a federal correctional facility and the total liquidation of his entire real estate portfolio to pay off $12 million in court-ordered restitution and back taxes. His luxury estate was seized by the bank, and my cruel step-siblings were left completely penniless overnight, forced to move out of their luxury penthouses and find entry-level retail jobs just to pay for basic groceries after their corporate allowances were permanently erased from existence. Now I sit in the bright, beautiful, sunlit garden of our new home, navigating my physical therapy sessions with absolute peace, dignity, and comfort, surrounded by people who love me for exactly who I am. On the main wall of our living room hangs a beautiful photograph of our true family, the people who actually show up, respect our boundaries, and protect one another when the storm hits. My father tried to use my physical vulnerability to mock my existence, break my spirit, and assert his toxic dominance in front of a laughing room. But by keeping our emotions completely out of the equation, letting the digital financial data do the talking, and striking at the exact second he felt completely untouchable, we didn't just take away his pride, we permanently dismantled his entire life.